So welcome everybody to our session today. Today's session is not just the only Power of a Super Regional session we're going to be doing. We're going to be doing a series. So today's part one, searching for data and managing results. And we're here to deliver this content for you today. You've got your chairs of the MLS and Technology Committee, Jody, Vanessa, and of course me. I'm still working here. I'm your CTO for the MLS. We've got Hud Bixler working as the MLS director now, and so my title has changed a little bit, but my focus is still on getting us the best system that we possibly can and making it better as we go forward.
Yay! The dream team, if you will.
So what are we doing today? It looks like we're going to do a presentation. What are some of the rules for today, Vanessa?
Yeah, no problem. So we are, as you guys already know, in webinar format. So down at the bottom of your screen, you're going to see two options. There's the chat, where you can talk amongst yourselves or cheer people on. That's totally great. If you have questions, we are going to do our best to answer them at the end. If there's something really pertinent to what Jay is discussing, we'll try and squeeze it in at the same time. But all of your questions should go into the Q&A section so that it's easy for us to keep track. So you know the drill by this point, everyone. So looking forward to it.
Perfect. And yeah, that's totally right. If it's something really pertinent to something we're exactly discussing, I do want to take questions on the fly. But if it's something unrelated, we'll sort of save those and we'll see if they apply when we get to the end, where we'll sort of do a more general questions period. Awesome. So the way we're going to kick off each one of these super regional videos is just talking about, is this a new MLS system? And people keep saying, well, it's so different. It might as well be a new MLS system. Why don't we just get a new MLS system? And so I'd like to kind of break that down a little bit. So the answer to, is it a new system, is no, but maybe, I mean, a little. And so what are sort of the three ways you could think about it? Well, we had a limited system before. We had a legacy system that didn't really have good interoperability with other systems. It worked, and we had forced things to work with other external systems, but they weren't really working well. They would break easily, and the data would be defined differently in two different systems, and it was just not really usable. We used to use some pretty non-standard data structures. We used to break data up into categories that sort of didn't exist in the rest of the market of the United States. And we had some legacy processes that made sense for our system, but kind of don't going forward. On the flip side of that, at the very bottom, what would happen if we got a completely different system? So let's go get a brand new one off the shelf and start using that. Well, that would bring with it a lot more work than what we're facing today. Imagine entirely new workflows in entirely unfamiliar screens and dialogues. And sometimes even the way you would manage a listings lifecycle would be different. Excuse me. So we're not going to talk about listing lifecycle management today, but we are going to talk about this system having the complete data set and how that data set is optimized for data interoperability and ease of use. But that does mean you may have to relearn some processes. Things you used to do in the past that always just got you results for San Francisco aren't going to work like that anymore. And we're going to deep dive into a bunch of that today. But the long and the short of it is, it's not a new system, but some parts feel like a new system. And that will mean we have to learn some new skills. And that's why we're kicking off the super regional video series with today's session.
So Jay, I pretty much only do real estate in San Francisco. The old system worked perfectly. We are different from everyone else. That's why we had a different MLS, and it used to be so easy. So if it's not a new system, why is it so difficult? Why is it so hard to use now?
That's a fantastic question. And the long story short is that if it's easy, it may be limited. If it's powerful, it might be more difficult. And so if you want to let agents work anywhere in the Bay Area, if you want to let them, get beyond the borders of the city and not have to learn 3 different MLS systems and 4 other external products, I mean, it did add complexity, but what we get in exchange for learning how that complexity works is power. And once you have all the data in one place, you can learn a few new skills that lets you take advantage of how powerful having everything at your fingertips is. The other thing that's really cool is that before we would have gaps. The data in the city wouldn't be all the data in the city. A few East Bay agents would input it only into Paragon. Maybe some South Bay agents would put it only into MLS listings. And so we would never see that data unless you went to those systems. And so that was very difficult to do. And it meant that even if you were just looking at San Francisco through SFAR, you weren't seeing all the data. So now we have all the data, and that's powerful. But here we are, we're going to learn some new skills.
Got it. So old system was like flip phone, new system is like iPhone 13.
Right.
It's going to be a lot harder to use, but there is a lot more things to utilize in that powerful phone.
That's right. And so when we talk about how much power we've gained and how much data we've acquired, it really breaks down to this. 7 separate MLS systems came together with 3 different MLS technology providers. That's your Rapatoni and your CoreLogic and your Black Knight. 60,000 agents, 120 million data point records. I mean, it's not just the active listing inventory, it's the historical inventory going back to 2003. It's the change record on each listing. Each record would indicate when changes happen, and all of that's been converted. We're still, of course, doing some work. We know that we've delivered about 90% of the functionality and features, which work 95% of the time. We're really proud of the fact that it's been almost 100% uptime. We've had almost no system crash downtime. There's been intermittent periods where we have had short interruptions, but largely it's been a completely uptime system that has not gone down on us, and that's huge. When other super regionals and other large regional systems try to do this across the country, sometimes they experience periods of day or several days of downtime. And so we really feel like, even though there's been some false starts with some of the functionality, there's been a really great running straight ahead with uptime. And we are more than aware of the 5% of the functionality that still needs to get addressed. We're working on those things as hard as we can. The current hot button item is getting all the broker tour, reciprocal broker tour information working exactly correctly. We're not going to touch too much on broker tour today. That'll be later, but please know that we're working on that.
That is some impressive numbers. I'm sure that amongst those 7 MLSs, you must have hundreds of people working on this huge amount of data.
Across the 7 different companies, plus the 3 different MLS providers. So 10 companies had to figure out ways to communicate together and figure out how to work together, where they previously had different business models or sometimes different working models. And we've really come together as a team, and we continue to refine that through the NorCal MLS Alliance, which is what groups all of this stuff together. So that's where all that power comes from and all that data. But today we're going to focus on some specific content. So as I said, today's part 1 of our super regional series. Today we're going to do searching and organizing your search results. And of course, today we're going to have Jody checking the Q&A and moderating for us. And Vanessa and I are going to try to fly you through all this content. Looking ahead, we've got a part 2 and a 3 that are coming in November and December, and we'll look at those dates at the very end. I want to mention also that we've got some other cool channels coming here. We've been using Agent Sneak Peek as an opportunity to deliver short updates. So every Monday we meet at 1 o'clock, we go over a couple of listings, and then I usually do a system update or comment on what we've gotten working just most recently. So you should definitely check that out. And based on some feedback from members, we've got a really kind of cute You Ask, We Answer video series starting this month. We're going to release 2 videos a week. The first 2 are already in the can. They're just going through post-production. And so we're excited about delivering those in October.
You guys, I saw a little sneak peek of them, and they're great. So they're going to be helpful and kind of TikTok-esque amusing entertainment at the same time. So a win-win.
We're going to try to make it entertaining. So today is our core skill. We're going to look at search and organizing data results. I cannot stress enough how important search is to getting the rest of the MLS working for you correctly. Once you really understand how search works in our new, very powerful system, it dovetails into all of the other things you want to do. CMAs, making sure your clients, your prospects get the right data delivered to them. None of that works quite right if your search skills aren't, totally up to snuff. So with that, we're going to look at a few things. The first one is it a bug, or have I just excluded results? We're going to look at why does city, county, and district sometimes produce different results. And I'm going to show you how to start with open searches and come down to more narrow, focused results. We're going to look at how to save and reuse search patterns using things like folders. I'm going to show you some select tricks. And more importantly than any of those things, I'm going to really shine a light on how to group your data together and how to use sorting and grouping together. I'll bet that's something not a lot of people know, Vanessa.
Probably not, because I have learned some tricks prepping for this very webinar.
So with that note, where it all is in your home MLS system. I know that seems obvious now, but if you set the Wayback Clock to 2018, people had to single sign on into like 5 or 6 places to make sure they saw all the data. Sometimes they had to sign into third-party networks to see some data. And that's just not the way it works anymore. We didn't quite have all the coming soon data at launch, but we've got it all now. And so going forward, you can rest assured that this is where it all is. And while it's got all of that data, if you have a look at my MarketWatch panel in this screenshot, you can see that it tells me there's 828 new listings. Fantastic. But I got a feeling, Vanessa, that that's not what people want to see.
You might think it's fantastic. I find it not helpful information.
Well, that's because you are here. And at the end of the day, having all the data is powerful, but let's figure out how to refocus and get everything set up to just look at San Francisco.
Perfect.
So one of the most common things I hear people report is, how come when I search for all the data in districts 1 through 10, I'm sometimes missing data? And the truth of the matter is, we are processing data from 7 systems, and we do have to make sure that all of those listings in the city get assigned a district and a sub-district value. Sometimes that process fails. There can be typos in addresses, or sometimes the process runs later. We accumulate all the data, and then we look for the ones that are blank, and then we reprocess those to get them to catch up. So in this screenshot I've pulled here, you can see that I just did a broad search on all the residential in the city of San Francisco. And then on the right, I did all of the residential data, but I limited it to districts 1 to 10. And you can see, if you focus on those results at the top, that when I did the city or county, I found 1,245 listings. But when I did districts 1 through 10, I found less. Now, why does that happen, right?
I don't know, but I think I'm going to support a ticket. There must be a glitch. There's a bug. Something is definitely wrong.
Right. And the really interesting part about it is, it's not actually a bug. It's just a system catching up to processing all of the data that's been sort of brought in from all these systems, and it refreshes sometimes minute by minute from all of these systems. So you sometimes have to wait. One of the things I do want to mention before we jump into the grid and the examples is, when in doubt, use the map. One of the great parts about the map is that it uses the latitude and longitude of every property. So if you're drawing a bounding box on our interactive map search, it's always going to find everything that really is there, because we have geocoded all of the properties, even if we haven't assigned the district and subdistrict correctly. But let's take a look at this concrete example right now. Here I limited it, I think, to just one of the subdistricts. And I said, let's pull everything and take a look at why some of them don't have an area district value. Oh yeah, this is everything in District 1. And I found that there were also some that were just assigned to San Francisco County. So this shows you why that's happening. It's that the district and subdistrict hasn't been set yet. So that's why the counts are different if you only search on District 1 through 10. Now, if I wait overnight, chances are good that the geoprocessor will run over Kirkwood Avenue and looks like Garnet Terrace, and it's going to geolocate those and set the district and subdistrict for those correctly in the batch process that runs. But you can see by looking at the MLS numbers, see them there, the column furthest to the left, 409 means it's from the MAX system, the East Bay, and the ones that start with 818 come from MLS listings south of us. Now check out that last MLS listing that's there. It's the second to last. It's already run through the geoprocessor and has been assigned the correct District 1 and Outer Richmond subdistrict. So we just have to wait for those other ones to catch up. But if you're really concerned about missing the 1 listing or 2 listings there that haven't processed yet, you can always open up your search and just look at everything in the city, or flip to the interactive map and draw your bounding box over the area you really want to see, and you'll be able to see that. Now, I think it might make sense for us to jump into the MLS and do some concrete examples. So why don't we do that?
Sounds good.
Let me know if you can see my dashboard for the MLS.
It looks perfect.
Cool. So in here, if I go to my standard search, how you can see this work for yourself is you can come here to area district and you can put in 1 to 10. You can run a preview count and you can see what the count is today. I can take that value out. I'm going to come down to city. I'm going to put in San Francisco, not Presidio though, just the whole city. There we go. And I'm going to see that it goes up. It goes up from 1207 to 1215. Now that means there's 8 listings that I wouldn't see if I was just relying on my district search. So again, it's not a ton, but it's a few. And it's a few enough that you might want to check every once in a while to see what you're not seeing, especially if you're in the race to make sure your customers see everything as soon as possible. This is a good thing that you can check. We're going to try to speed up the process of setting those district and sub-district values, of course, but don't hesitate to come and check it yourself so that you can make sure you see everything. So I want to talk a little bit also about standard search and statuses. I think there's some power here that people aren't aware of, and I want to sort of show you a couple things. So the first one is when you're doing searches on sold data, people are wondering why they're missing some sold listings. I'll show you why. So if I was interested in everything that's sold in July and August, everyone's familiar with how to do this. So you can say check off closed. I want to see all the ones that closed in July. So limit my date bracket, and I've got the checkbox checked. Let's just see what we get here. So that is way too many results. Clearly, I've forgotten to limit it to San Francisco. There we go. This should be more reasonable. That's a much more reasonable data set. And when I view those results, you may find that there's a few listings missing. Someone might point one out to you and say, oh yeah, I remember selling something in July, but it isn't here. We sold it while it was in coming soon. And then when we closed it as sold off MLS, which is the normal workflow for a listing that sells, gets an offer that's accepted while it's in coming soon status. How can you make sure you don't miss those? Well, the answer is to also include sold off MLS and to make sure you're using the same date range. And now we're going to go from our previous count to a couple of extra listings. And this is going to add a few back in. You can see here that they appear in line. Because I've selected more than one status in my search, I see them all together.
Super handy.
You might want to see them grouped though.
Yeah.
So I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but I'm just going to show you. If I pull up status into the top, I can see that the closed ones are first. And then if I go to the end of my result set, I can see that the sold off MLS ones are grouped together at the very end. We'll get more into grouping in a second.
That was exciting. And I can't wait till we get there because you move so fast. I'm not even sure what you did.
Okay, well, we'll make sure we cover it here in detail as we're getting to it. So that was the sold and how to use sold and sold off MLS to make sure you're seeing all of the data. So again, as I said, don't miss the 0-day solds. Those will be in your sold off MLS status. And at system launch, there was almost no data there, but now we've been live for 7 months. So you're starting to see that the status is being used more and more when someone has a coming soon listing and they don't want it to go out. They just want to resolve it as closed. They'll use sold off MLS to do that. So this is really important that you start checking off the status.
And I'm adding that into my normal workflow now.
And I'm going to show you a tip in a second on how to make sure that you don't have to remember. I can show you how the system will remember for you in just a second. Okay, so the last thing I want to talk about is while we're talking about statuses and sold off MLS, what statuses stop DOM? What statuses stop CDOM? And which statuses actually get you into a case where you can wait 30 days and bring back as new? I think everyone always knew this about DOM, hey? The hold, canceled, expired, pending, closed. These are all off-market statuses, so DOM stopped.
And DOM is days on market, correct?
That's right. Yep, it's everyone's favorite number to play with. And the next column that I've got here shows you what happens with cumulative days on market. And a few statuses do stop the CDOM, some don't. So if you put a listing into hold status, it's still in the MLS and it's still available. It's not going out in data feeds. It's definitely held. So the CDOM has stopped. Sorry, the DOM has stopped, but the CDOM has not. But this does not start your 30-day reset. This is a very common misunderstanding. And so we're going to be including it in every single presentation we do going forward for the rest of the year. These are the only statuses that stop the timer, are canceled, start the timer, are canceled, expired, and when you close the listing. That means the listing is really gone. Now it's actually out of the MLS. In theory, under all three cases, it should no longer be under a listing agreement. Now your 30-day reset timer starts.
Got it.
Cool. I feel like that's really important. So why don't we put that in bold? There are only 3 statuses that let you say that your listing's really gone, and then you can bring it back in 30 days. They are canceled, expired, and closed. For leased listings, it would be leased.
Got it. So hold is really a temporary item. Perhaps there's issues getting access to the property.
Right.
And so instead of pulling the entire thing off the MLS, you just put a temporary hold on it, but it doesn't reset anything.
That's right. And in fact, to your point exactly, many of the other MLSs still use a conjugation of the word temporary and temporarily off or temporarily held. I find that wording, the verbiage, a little confusing. What I like about hold is it's very different from like withdrawn, temporary, or anything that's ambiguous or vague. It's very clear. This listing is in the MLS, but it's being held. But it's still not gone. It hasn't been canceled. It has not expired. We have not closed the listing. And I'll stop beating that to death.
Okay.
The next thing that's really cool is you can use search to intersect dates and statuses. Now, I bet this doesn't even make sense as a statement, but I'm going to show you something that's really, really neat. I'm going to go back to a standard search. And what would be a good example of dates and statuses intersecting? So do people get concerned, or do they want to know like how many listings came back on after a certain period of time? What would be a real world use case like this, Vanessa?
Yeah, absolutely. We've got the holidays coming up. And so often people will pull a listing off right before the holidays and then put it back on again in the new year. Or that's actually happening right now. A lot of people will pull things during the summer months and put them on again in the fall.
Right. So what if we were interested in knowing something about that data, data that might have been held during the summer that maybe now is coming back to market, or maybe it was in some other status that we couldn't see. So why don't we take a look at hold listings, and let's see if there was any pending ones over the summer too. But we only want to see cases where those were in one of those statuses during the summer. So instead of checking them, I'm going to uncheck them, and watch this. Let's use June. I'm being a little arbitrary here. So between June and September, I want to see what happened to the listings that were on hold between those dates. And I'm going to copy and paste that into my pending too. Now, because I have not checked any statuses, oh, better make sure I only look at the city.
Oh.
Because I have not checked those statuses, what I'm going to get in my result set is anything that was held or pending at that time. What status is it now?
Oh.
Notice how the status column has statuses that I didn't check. But what it has done is it has selected all the data that was held over the summer or pending, and it's given it to me now in a result set that I can sort by status. So I can see that of the listings, there were 64 of them that were held over the summer. At some point in that date span, all of these listings were in a held or pending status. What happened to them? So this is what happened to them. And you can organize it by status, or maybe you want to organize it by status date to see when the last time it changed. And then getting back into this grouping feature, if I pull the statuses up and use a group by, now I can sort by status date, and I can actually look at what are the range of changes inside each one of those statuses. So of the two listings that were canceled, when were they changed last? Inside the closed data, I can see that this condo was last touched in June 14th, and its status went to closed. And you can sort through them. You can see here that some of them were duplicate canceled. And on the last page, there are a few that are still held, and there are some that sold off MLS. So maybe when it was in a hold status, the listing ended up getting some kind of an offer, and it was shown to the seller, and the seller accepted it. So that is how you can use a combination of the date fields and the checkboxes for statuses to determine what happened in a period of time and sort of see what the disposition of those listings are now.
So that's pretty handy. So you just showed us two tricks. So one, you showed us how if we were lacking some inventory for a buyer client, we might be able to find canceled listings where the seller still might be interested in selling, even though it's not actively in the market right now.
Right.
And then you also sneakily, can you show us one more time? You just clicked on the blue hyperlinked title and you dragged it up. And
I did.
Stuck.
It's that simple. And it's like the most powerful hidden feature that no one knows about. So let's do that again.
Let's.
I'm going to grab the type this time. So again, we were looking at all this data. It was held over the summer. What happened to it? Let's group that by type so we can see if there's any pattern different between the single house on lot, HSL1s, and the condos. Maybe we might see a pattern. So here I've pulled up the type into the top so we can group by that. And now I know my condos are first. That's why it says condo here. We can sort by status inside that. So it kept all the condos together, and now it's sorting by status within that grouping.
Okay, now you're talking. This is super helpful. This is kind of like the old school tabs we had in the older version.
Right. Let's do that.
Use this a lot.
Yeah, let's do that real example. That's a really fun example because I know it was a common pain point for people. They were like, Jay, I used to be able to get 2 tabs. Why can't I do that ever again? And the answer is you sort of can. It's one grid, but you can organize your data however you want. So in this case, let's just look at all the data that's in 5 and 7 for fun. And preview count. Okay, I got 249 listings. I've got my property type selected residential, but I have not selected any subtypes, so I'm getting everything. And when we run that, I can pull up my type into the top, and now I've got my data grouped by the old style type. Condos are split out from my residential single family homes. I can step through my pages, more condos, lots of condo inventory. There's a couple of co-ops. Here's my HSL1s, my house on lot with 1 dwelling. Awesome. What if you really needed to know how those were grouped by their subtype value? Well, you could also click on subtype description and it'll sort by that inside your master type. So again, here's all your attached, some of your detached, customs, flats, etc.
Awesome.
Hey, Jay, we have a couple of questions that come back specifically to types. One person is asking if we can group within types, and the second portion would be, is there a way to group types in a hot sheet?
Oh, these are great questions. So one of the first things I'll point out is not every field can be grouped. Data fields sometimes have values in them that don't group nicely. Sometimes you can group some of the date fields, sometimes you can't. So for example, there I'm trying to group on listing date. That is a date range, like every listing could have a completely different date. So that really wouldn't work for grouping. So you can't group on some fields. But the question was, can I group on type and then do some other kinds of grouping within that? And for that, you mainly focus on using your subtype descriptions and sorting, but you can drag several fields up into the top. And in this case, property subtype is not one that you can add to type, but you could add something like, well, maybe we can grab the MLS origin and group by that in addition. No, we can't. But we could group by status in addition to type. So you can see that you can drag more than one field up into the top. When you do that, each combination becomes a unique value. So if there's condos that are active, and if I had maybe the contingents also in here, you'd have condos active and then condos contingent. And then within those, you could still do a sort. So you could actually really powerfully refine this technique to give you exactly what you love, it grouped with data grouped exactly how you like to see it. And we're definitely getting into all the power of the grid now. So we might as well move on to our next topic, which is this thing is incredibly powerful. Sometimes it's too powerful, but because it has so much configurability and control, I think, Vanessa, would you say that people maybe are scared of it?
Well, sometimes when there's so much and so new, I'm afraid to hit the wrong button and I don't know how I'm going to get back.
You know, that's a reasonable fear. What if I press the wrong button and I destroy some data? What if I press the wrong button and now I can't get back to where I was? Now, thankfully, a lot of these controls are completely non-destructive. So when you're doing things like customizing your grid, or if you're modifying what grid you're using, changing what columns are visible, these things are non-destructive. And so I think we should jump in and look at taking advantage of these tools so people aren't intimidated by it anymore.
Perfect. Customizing grid is one of my favorite things because I know that I like to see things differently than what the presets can often be. For example, when I work with condo buyers, almost all of them have some limit or some requirement around their HOA dues.
Oh, interesting.
It is super annoying if I were to have to click into every single listing and look those up. So can you show us how you can just always have HOA dues show up on your grid search?
That's a great question and a very practical one. I totally get it. So the association fee field is what we use now for displaying the HOA fees. The Real Estate Standards Organization Data Dictionary, which you guys have heard me banging on about for a few years, gives us these names we're supposed to use so that it's common across all the various systems in America. So you're looking for your association fee for your homeowners association. Let's add that to the grid. So I started by pressing Customize Grid, which brought me to here. And now I've got the available fields and the selected fields that I can, move data between. So I'm going to insert that field somewhere really prominent. Now, what those numbers mean are the sort order. So, 10, 20, 30, 40. This lets me do something pretty neat. Like if I know exactly that I want it to appear after MLS origin, I could make the number 25 or something like that, and I can insert it. Now, you don't have to do that. You can just click add and it'll add it to the bottom, and then you can use the move up and move down controls. That's fine. I'm just going to be clever here a little bit and use that index number so that it inserted it for me. And then when I go back to my grid, if I don't remember to click save, I won't see my new value. So I got to click save first. And now I'm going to go back to my list. And now I've got an association fee value. Let's sort by that. A whole bunch have none. I bet your clients would like that, but let's go to the ones at the end and figure out what's going on. Okay, so there's some pretty expensive ones that exist. And you could sort by that. You could also then change your search to search within certain parameters of that. But this gives you a way to view all of the condos, and then you can sort through them and see which ones have the high association fees and which ones don't.
That's awesome.
But maybe you also work mainly in one other district where you only do residential single family homes. So if you were going to do something like that, having this association fee column in here is going to be really annoying.
Yeah.
Well, maybe there's a way we could do something smarter. I'm going to go back into Customize Grid, and knowing that this is my one with association fee, I'm going to move that one down a bit. Let's put it down kind of by the price. Okay, there. So I've got it now located right by price. That's great. I'm going to save it. But instead of going back to my results, I'm just going to make a copy of this grid, and I'm going to call it my condo grid. Maybe let's call it one line condo grid. Save that. And now, little gears are turning. I've got an entirely new view that I've just created that I intend just to use for condos. So I'm going to leave that association fee value there. There's probably some other condo specific fields I might drag in too, right? But I'm not going to do that right now. I'm going to go back to the field I was on, or the grid I was on, which was my one line grid. And I'm going to remove the association fee. Save it. And now when we go back to my list, I can see that I've got mixed data values here. There's some condos. I think at the end of it, we still have some residential single families. If I view it as just my default one line grid, the value is not in the column list. If I change it to my one line condo grid, it will just refresh the view and it will reinsert that association fee column at exactly the index I wanted it. So by using the group by feature and having your own defined grids, you can actually rebuild an entirely separate view of what you want to see when condo is your data set, what you want to see when residential is your data set, and maybe you just use the default one line grid when it's everything all together, regardless of property type, property subtype. So this restores all of that functionality that people felt like was missing before, and it's totally configurable on a user by user basis.
That's amazing. Mind is blown. I'm not sure if I've ever noticed that drop down menu before. So I'm going to be making some customized grids to toggle between to save me time in the future. That's great.
And it does take time, but it saves you time in the future. Right. And what's really valuable is that if you do take the time to do that initial setup, if you think purposefully about what you want to see when you're looking at result sets and build your views to match your business needs. You're going to have a greater understanding of the system in terms of what fields are available at all. You'll have a greater understanding of how the system delivers to you just what you need. And now you've taken advantage of the power of it. I could even create a grid here that's called my Sacramento grid. And if it surfaces specific columns of data that I want to see, if I'm, looking for a client that said they want to maybe move from the city to somewhere outside the city, I can set up my data grid to show me things that matter when I'm looking at data in Sacramento that just don't matter here.
That's awesome. So anytime we're going to be doing this, the very first step is right under the residential tab. You see that box where it says customize grid. That's the button you're going to push right there. And that's going to bring you to the special menu. So if you are sick of seeing the county of San Francisco showing up on every single search and taking up space because we're already in the county of San Francisco, you can make that disappear forever.
And in fact, that's a really great suggestion. I'm going to remove county and save that. And then I'm going to go back to my normal one-line grid, and I'm going to make that same change to my condo one too. So I'm on my condo one. Let's go back to my normal one-line grid.
Jay, we have a couple of questions in regard to these changes.
Sure. Let's take them.
It would be, how often will your changes be saved? With multiple buyers and criteria, do you need to redo each time? And the second question would be, those blank fields that you mentioned, are those just blank, or are they zero, or are they omitted entries?
Both really fantastic questions. Let's take that first one. And the first one was, sorry, Jody, what was the first one?
It was, how often do your changes need to be saved?
Well, the answer is they save permanently, and you set them by property type inside each grid definition. So here's my one-line grid. And you can see the 8 property types across the top, of which only 4 or 5 are really relevant to me. And maybe in your business, only 2 or 3 are. And once you set those up correctly the way you want, those persist forever. Doesn't matter what search you run. If you're using one-line grid to view your results, it will show you what you've configured. And it doesn't matter where you run the search. If you run it from the map, I showed you before about running interactive map with a polygon, and then I picked my result set. How do I want to view it? You could grab the custom defined ones that you have, and it will sort that data using that. So once you've set it up once, and again, make sure you use save, it will persist forever, and you'll always be able to choose that view from that little drop down that's in the far right corner. It doesn't seem to matter where I start from. So just to reinforce that, I'm going to make a new tab in the MLS. You know what? I don't know if people actually know all about that. Did you see what I did, Vanessa?
I did not.
So what I did was I was on the MLS, and I don't want to get away from my grid editing. I may want to change some columns still, but I also want to look at the map. I don't want to make a whole new web browser instance. I don't want to have to log in again and confuse the login and authentication system. I just want another tab. There's a button in the top right corner that's called Get a New Instance. It opens a new tab, and it creates a new instance of the MLS without having you log in again. You didn't re-authenticate, just gave you a new one, totally separate. And if you keep making changes on this one, so you keep editing the grid and saving stuff, that is independent of this other one, which I'm now going to load the interactive map. Then I'm going to sort of go through that exercise again where I've got data. I'm going to choose my one-line condo grid. And sure enough, association fee is going to be in there. Here's all the closed ones that were in that search. And their association fees. So you can always select those displays, and having more than one tab of the MLS open is really, really handy. We've tested this in many different browsers. We've gotten up to 4, 5, 6 tabs. It seems optimized around 3 or 4. In most web browsers, after 4 tabs, you're starting to really mess with your web browser's memory.
That's super handy. So if you're doing a search for one client and something comes out to spark your memory about a new one, you don't have to drop everything. You could just quickly add a new tab and work without touching your other results.
Like the phone rings, right? And now it's an emergency. I need to do something else, but I don't want to lose where I am. That's exactly right. That's how I do it. That's great. Now, the second question that Jody had for us was, what do the blank values really mean? And blank values are interesting. If you see a 0, that usually means the value is legitimately 0, i.e. someone put a 0 in because they mean nothing. But if it's blank, it just may mean the absence of data. And the absence of the data is not always synonymous with a 0. In this case, it actually does. The value for the association fee on some of these properties that are in 6, for example, looks like they don't have association fees. So that's equivalently 0. But what that means is that when the listing agent was putting this data in, or when the data was being converted, there was no value found for association fee, so no value is displayed. And when you're using sorting, this is a handy trick to know too. Null values, blanks, are always sorted together, and they are sorted separately from zeros. So in a field, maybe something in the commercial property type, the blank ones would be grouped together, the true zeros would be grouped together, and then the ones with values would be sorted after that.
Great. So a blank box usually has to do with how the data was input. So it could be a user error situation. If the listing agent didn't write in the dues, then it wouldn't show up in association fees, correct?
Right, exactly. And in some cases, fields are required, like if I choose condo or any of the other types that association values are normally associated with, some of those fields will become required. And that makes sure that we have the values when the property type sort of demands it. But if it's just a residential single family home detached, there may not be one, so the field will not be required.
Got it.
Jay, before we move on, we do have a couple more questions about the grid displays.
Awesome.
One is, how do you name the customized grid display? And then the second question would be, is it possible to add a price per unit column in the grid for multifamily?
These are fantastic questions. Let's go back, look at them in specific. When I go back to customize grid, this is where I have my fancy copy button. So this is a customized grid I created. This is the one that Vanessa and I built because we wanted to look at condos with association fee values. So if I've named this wrong, I can rename it. So it was a little bit bulky. So let's go one line, condo, and I'm just going to put W with fee, and then we'll save that. So now that's renamed it. But when you want to create a new one, your options are make a copy of the one I'm looking at, but this other button does create a blank view. Let's do that. What do we want to call it? Let's call it scratch view, because we're making it from scratch. And you can see that it's going to put all the columns on the left as not visible, and it's going to have just a default set on the right. It's going to go back to what are the Rapatoni defaults. There's not very many fields in the default set. It's really, really short. So now I can start from this very short field set and go dig in and get just what I want. Now, the second part of that question was on the multi-unit buildings, where you want to look at things like prices per unit, I think was some of the question. And so I'll go see if that exact field exists, but I want to show you another trick too. When I'm looking for data on a form, whether it's the listing input form or the available fields form or any form, making use of your web browser's search function is crucial. If I just Control F or Command F with the Apple key F on my Mac, I get a little search dialog. Now this is Chrome, so it's in the top right corner. If you're in another web browser, it may be in the bottom left. Firefox, for example, will put it in the bottom. But using this feature of my web browser, which is built into every web browser, I can look for the word unit, and then I can cycle through where does that word appear in my form. There's commercial number of units leased, right? So by using unit, I can find that column that our member was asking about. And once I've located that column, I can insert it into my selected fields. Once I've done that, maybe I would rename this one commercial with, cost unit or something like that, whatever was relevant to that specific request. That's how I would achieve that.
So you didn't just teach us an MLS trick, you just taught us a internet-wide trick. Is that correct?
Yeah, every web browser supports this feature. It can really save your bacon. I mean, we are all looking at screens now that have way more on them than we want to care about. We're going to dig into this a lot in our second series webinar, where we're going to do listing input and listing lifecycle management. We're going to really dig into the listing input form. I'm going to highlight this tip there too.
Awesome. So maybe you could say it one more time and Jody can drop this into the chat. I have a PC. I want that search thing to pop up.
Right.
What am I pushing again?
Your shortcut key is the Control, which is normally located on the very bottom left of your Windows keyboard, and F for find.
All right, so on my regular keyboard, on my regular PC, I'm going to do Control F for find. Let's say I am borrowing my husband's MacBook.
Right.
There's not, is it going to be the same? Can I do Control F?
It's super similar. It's so close, but they didn't make everything the same. There is another control key on a Mac keyboard that isn't the same as the Windows control key. The equivalent on a Mac keyboard is the Mac key, the Apple key, which is right beside the space bar. I usually slide my thumb into it, and then it's the same F. So I would use that, and it's called Command, I believe, as the name of the key. So I'd go Command F on my Mac, and that will bring up the exact same dialogue with my Mac keyboard.
Awesome. Can't wait to use that everywhere.
Yeah,
but helpful in this MLS where you have many search fields to sort through.
And maybe another place you might use that is if you're on this website called Zillow, maybe you're looking to see if your name is actually on the form somewhere, because that's your listing and it's being represented. You could just load up the listing in Zillow by address, Control F or Command F on your Mac, search for your name or your broker name. You better find the value somewhere on there, or else there's a problem with Zillow, for example.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to close that tab and get us out of the grids, and let's take a look at other content we wanted to look at today. So we talked about the group by feature a whole bunch, and we showed some really cool examples of combining group by and sorting. And we did criteria editing on the fly too. We went back and forth between the criteria to the grid. We went from grid to customize. We went back to the grid. We saw our results refresh, and we went from map to one of our custom grids and back and forth too. So that was all pretty powerful stuff. And the last thing, of course, we should talk about selecting and saving data. I see people a lot will say, I just get so much result data back. I just only want to save a few of them or look at a few of them. And there's a few ways to do this. And every agent does it differently. What's your favorite way to save some values? What do you guys do?
Saving which values in a...
Like if you get a bunch of listings back and you only care about some of them, what do you put them in?
I put them in a folder myself.
You always use folders?
I usually use folders. Maybe you should teach me a better way, Jay.
Sure. So I'll teach you the difference between your saved search and saving to your folder. So if I slide over here back to my MLS, there's two ways to look at your data that you're getting back. One is I want to see everything that fits my search right now. So let's make a search, or in fact, I'll load one of my saved searches. Let's get my District 8 mixed type search up here. Okay, fantastic. So if I have this result set and I want to save everything that's in here, I can add it to a folder. And I'm going to call it a new folder, and we're going to call it my mixed D8s, D8 types. And I could, add a description. So what I've got now, just like you would do, is I've got a folder that has all of those results in it. What's interesting about using a folder is these exact listing IDs are now in that folder forever. If my search was only pulling back active, which it was, in a week, when I go pull that folder, if I open up my folders, and if I want to go look at that mixed one, if I view this again in 3 or 4 days, these listing IDs might change status. They might change, well, their DOMs are going to change. They're going to increment, of course. And maybe there are other changes the listing agents are going to make to these listings. And what my folder will do is it will not add more listings to it, and it will not drop listings out. It will always have these listing IDs, and it will show me what happens to them over time. So maybe if you really were analyzing the 9 houses that are around your listing, and you want to see what happens to those over time, you might use a folder for that. The opposite of a saved folder is a saved search, which does not save the listing IDs. A saved search saves the listing parameters. So when I go and look at my saved searches, the main thing that each saved search highlights for me is what are the values in the criteria being used. I clicked on the wrong thing. I'm going to open my saved search again. I'm going to go down to my daily city and click on view criteria. Here is what is returned in that search. And so if I run this tomorrow, it's going to have different listings in it. It's going to get me everything that's active and contingent show within my area I specified. And it's going to change over time. Every Monday, if I run the same saved search, I'm always going to get different results because a week of time will change so many listings. Whereas if I look at my folder that I made today, a week later, nothing will have been removed or added. It'll be exactly those listing IDs with whatever their current statuses are and the current changes to them as they've evolved over the past week.
So Jay, I'm going to tell you a little secret and I'm going to make a deal here. You have a ton of saved searches. And if you were to log into my version of the MLS, I would have 0. I actually never use this feature.
Oh, wow.
So here's my deal. If you can teach me how to do a saved search, I will teach you how I do this in my MLS and why I have 0 of them in my version.
Yeah, that's great. So
Okay.
The reason why I do my saved searches this way, when I come up with my parameters, usually it's because I'm trying to find out what's going on in a place. So maybe it's, the Bayview. So I want to draw a map search around the Bayview and I'll add some other criteria and then I will save that as my saved search. And then I will rerun that search manually because I like to do those manually. So the 3 days later, when someone says, hey, Jay, what happened with that thing over there? I'll be like, oh yeah, let's go rerun the search. So I always use my saved search panel and then I'll come back and rerun that search. So maybe it was the cut, right? There was this idea that there was this thing called the cut. So I made a polygon for that and just started to look at it every couple of weeks to see what was going on. So that's what I would do as I manually run this. When someone asks me a question about it, I go and I do it manually, but maybe there's other ways to do it. What's the way you do it, Vanessa?
I'm going to show you, but you didn't hold up to 100% of your deal. I don't know how you saved the search. So I saw you on the search page. How do I turn it into a saved search?
Yes, good. Call me out. So I've got my residential. I'm going to do single family homes and condos. My clients don't understand what a tenancy in common is, and they don't really understand what a stock cooperative is. So I'm going to remove those because they're intimidated by that. Maybe they're moving from outside of the city or from outside of the state. But they would entertain townhouses. So that's what they've asked for. They want to specifically live in districts 2 or 3, and using a comma and the number 3, I can actually put more than one district right in that box. That's why there only needs to be 4. There's literally no reason you'd ever need more than 4. If you do, you should switch to the map. So I'm going to put that in. I want to see actives. Let's see the ones that are still being shown. Let's check out and see if there's any coming soons my clients would want to know. And that should work. I've got 2 and 3. There we go. Preview my count. Sweet. So instead of pressing search or view results, I'm going to slide over to the save button. I'm going to press save. I'm going to name this 2, 3, and I'm going to call it Resis because the condos and the townhouses effectively fit into what my client's definition of a single family home is. I'm going to save that. And now it says it has been saved. When I go to my saved searches, it will sort them again and there it is. It's my second one. That's how I do it.
Okay. So now you've taught me that. I don't know, however, if I'm going to do any safe searches because here's my own little personal hack that I use. And I'm sure some other agents have figured this out.
Okay.
What I do is I will go to my contacts folder and create a prospect who isn't actually a person. So I will call this prospect District 2 and 3 Resi.
Really? Okay. Do you leave it active?
I will leave it active. And I click all the correct buttons so that I can start a portal. So manage as a prospect.
Yeah. I don't put name on report. Okay. Now I've got my okay. Keep going.
Okay. And then, I added my email address up there so that I get emails. So I use my own. You'll use your own in this example.
Yeah, got it.
Okay. And then I go down here and I set up my search right here. So now I'm going to put in the exact same criteria.
I see.
Right?
Yeah, I got you.
And so I don't ever want to have to go back and keep hitting save search. So if I do this, it will automatically run the search for me continuously. And I can adjust the settings to have it send it to me every day, once a week, whatever the case is.
Nice.
And then everything just lives in that prospect cart, so that if the status changes, or if I want to see if anything has sold or whatever, again, I'm not rerunning any search. I'm just opening up that prospect cart to see what lives in there.
That's really, really clever. I hadn't thought of using the prospect view like that, where you're sort of using yourself as your own client so that you could see the way it would run. I mean, this also gives you a really good model of seeing what your clients are going to see before they see it. That's super clever. I like that. I like that a lot. But I do want to show you one of the things you can do with saved search that might save you a step, if this other way of doing it might be valuable. So I'm going to go back and get that search. And to your point, you may want to run this on a regular period. As I was saying, I run them manually because I want to just sort of, like, when someone asks me a question, I want to go and pull those results. But when I click save for this, I do have more options. And in that more options, I can scroll down and I can set up things like the different sort options. I can maybe add it to my market watch or not, and I can schedule it. So when I save, I can schedule this to run on a period. Let's see. That's strange. Normally it would show up right in this dialog box. So I must be clicking on the wrong thing right now. I'll back up my example. But yes, that's super clever on how to use it through the prospecting and the client setup. I hadn't thought of that. Really smart.
And Thelma had a really quick question in how my hack works. So she was worried that the prospects carts won't pull coming soon data. However, Jay, is that true?
Well, it used to be true. And the reason it was true is because none of the other MLSs were permitting that either. And we hadn't figured out a way to reciprocate and transmit all that coming soon data. Now, that all has been solved. We pull all the pre-market data from all of our MLS partners now where they have it. And once we did that, we all agreed through our regional data share agreement, the NorCal MLS Alliance, that we would allow them to be put into carts. So when I was managing that contact, as you were instructing, I was able to show that I had put that status was one I could turn on. There it is. So I was able to turn on coming soon now in my cart maintenance. This used to be grayed out, but now it's not anymore. You can include them now.
Yay! Just another perk of the super regional. We're all sharing coming soon data. And so now you can also share it with your clients in the prospect cart.
And by the way, that change was directly driven from member feedback. Members were saying, look, I may need to do this from time to time, and I may need to include some coming soon data. And because we heard that same request coming in multiple MLS markets, we got together as our joint group and we were able to say, this makes sense. Our agents need this. And so let's turn it on.
Awesome. So I know that we have crammed a ton of information in here. We've tried to answer as many questions as we can. I know we've hit our 1 hour mark. Jody, is there any final super important item that we should be covering before we sign off?
There are just a couple outstanding questions.
Sure.
The one would be, is there a way to group or type in the hot sheet?
Oh yeah, I forgot to go over that. Let's go take a look. Before I get there, I'm pretty sure that you can use it, but it doesn't persist. So if I'm using a hot sheet search, and why would I even use a hot sheet search? Instead of saying that I want to look at data that's currently, in a search result for a district, or instead of saying I want to look at, some period of data in the past, what a hot sheet lets you do is view what's immediately happened most recently, like a delta or a change set. And so my hot sheet search gives me a completely different set of search values. Instead of having my normal date parameters, I have changes to include and a days back that I can change. So what if I wanted to see everything that's happened in the last 3 days? And I do mean everything. Show me the new listings. I want to see the back on markets. I want to see if any listings have undergone increases or reductions. Maybe I don't care about the contingents right now. I want to know if anything expired, and show me everything that's happened with listings shifting to inactive status. And I might still limit it to just single family homes, condos, and townhouses, just to use that other example about my client. I'm going to touch nothing else. And I'm going to get back a lot of data. So I guess I will set something else down here. Let's just look at District 8. Okay, so when I view my results, I'm getting back all of those deltas I asked for. And it looks like the bug that I saw a few days ago has been fixed. The last time I ran a hot sheet search, I did want to group by change type, and it stayed. There's my change type. It grouped by new listings first, price decreases, expireds, inactives. Apparently there were no other deltas of those other kinds in that period I specified, which was 3 days. And I can see what I specified by clicking this little view criteria button. You don't always have to go back and view the search page. If you just click view criteria, you can see exactly what you had in your search parameters. All of those little black buttons right up there at the top, super helpful. And the one I did want to show you today too is, what do all the checkboxes do? Let's blast through that quickly and then let's take any remaining questions. So what I want to show you is, I can uncheck everything that's in all of my search results, uncheck all of them. I can uncheck everything within a page view. So this checkbox in the middle along the columns will only select or deselect what's on the page. And then of course there's checkboxes for specific listings. These listings I don't care about. I don't want to look at them. I'm going to take them out. And then I'm going to say only show me the checked ones. And now I'm viewing 8 of my 19 results.
That's handy. Okay, so what if I'm finished with my zoomed in view and I want to go back? Do I have to go all the way back to the original search, or can I view the ones I had unchecked?
You can flip it. So you can go from checked only to unchecked only. And so now I've inverted my view. Now I'm looking at the 11 that I had deselected. And getting rid of the filter totally is a bit tricky. I always just go back to revise criteria, and then I rerun the search fresh. And it preserves my change type, but it removed my select options. All right, let's take any remaining questions. I think we have time for one or two. Yeah.
All right. Is there a best way to search on loft condos?
That's a great question. And yes, there definitely is. So from a standard search, I want to start by selecting residential, and I'm going to select very little else, but there's this link here called subtype description. And with subtype description, I can choose some, none, all. So we were talking about lofts. Maybe let's also look at some live works. And what else? Maybe flats. And if I was to check require all, what does that button do? It would mean that only listings that had all 3 values checked would come back. That's not what we want. We want any listing that has any of these 3 values to come back. So with those 3 values selected, I click OK. It now shows me which ones I'm including. I'm going to look for everywhere in the city because I want to look all over the city of San Francisco. And I can see that there's 160 of them. There I go. Now, let's talk about saving yourself some pain. That was a few steps. Let's save that as a search. We're going to save that as loft search. Oh, let's call it city loft search because we knew we picked everything in the city. All right, fantastic. It's now the next day. I come in, I log into the MLS dashboard. I'm going to start the MLS interface. I love lofts. I want to run my loft search again. So I'm going to start by looking at my saved searches. And down here, I've got my city loft search. Goes straight to my results. And then I can start doing all my fancy refining. I could start grouping by my district. I could start saying, just show me the ones organized by master type. Maybe I only want ones that are specifically condo as opposed to the ones that were classified as townhouse. So again, you can start with your work done for you in your saved searches as like a baseline, a base point. And then from there, you can do your further interrogation and digging. And I could even use revised criteria, and I could just look at District 7. I don't know if there'll be any in District 7. There's 16. I could view results. None of this has destroyed my saved search. So today I care about District 7 lofts. But tomorrow morning, come back into work again, start up my dashboard, hit the MLS. I'm going to go straight back to where I was before, where I'm going to pull everything in my saved search. It was called City Loft Search. I get back the entire result set again. I didn't break it by doing further refinement. This is how you can turbo power this thing.
Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt, but I do have a question.
Sure.
I have run this loft search many, many times, and there are not all the lofts in that search. Do you know the answer as to why that is?
Well, if there's ever data that's not returned when you've got a criteria, two things could be happening. One, and the most common thing, is that the agent who's inputting the data somewhere out there in the MLS ecosystem isn't selecting the value. There's not a lot we could do about that. The second thing that could be happening is that if there's been a data translation of some kind, something maybe has said flat in the description, but they forgot to check a box, or if they just picked the wrong value, obviously you're not going to be able to find those either. I mean, there's a very small percentage chance that it's a bug. But another thing that might be common is when you were doing your criteria, you selected something where you said, I need it to be a loft and I need it to be something else. And those two things never occur together. What would be a good example? Let's say that it's residential and it's 3 houses on lot is what I've selected here. And I've got this subtype description checked. There's 0. And the reason there is 0 is because there is no valid combination of 3 separate structures on the lot and loft, live, work, or flat. That'll often sort of get you. So what you should do is broaden your search. Whenever you get one of these zeros, the answer isn't the system is broken or the data doesn't work. It's undo some of your specificity, like be more generic with your search result, back out of that view a bit, change a few values, try again. Aha, that's because the lofts and the live works and the flats are probably mostly under condominium, which is why now I get a result set.
Yeah, I would say that 9 times out of 10, it was your very first option, because I do get this question a lot. How come not all the lofts are in the loft category when I search it? And the answer is, it is actually very common for the listing agent to choose to not select the loft button. People, I think, are worried that agents won't find their loft if they've checked that box.
Oh, right.
So loft is not a required category. So it's all based on how accurate the human inputting that listing into the MLS is doing. So just a handy thing to remember, if you're doing a loft search, you're going to find everything that a listing agent has designated a loft, but you might just have to do a general condo search and visually find the other lofts that are actually in there.
Yep, all pro tips. Do we have any other questions, Jody, that we can squeeze in? I do have one more thing I'm going to talk about, just our upcoming training, but let's try squeeze one more in if we can.
We do. The first is kind of like a quick yes, no. Is there a way to log into the MLS directly versus having to log into the SFAR main dashboard first?
No, and there are occasionally ways where the system state will be preserved, and so you can kind of skirt around it, but that doesn't do you any favors. When you log into the MLS dashboard, you're actually setting up your single sign-on profile in your browser instance so that you can access all of the other products easily and quickly. We do need you to come through the dashboard, and the reasons for this are many. One is it sets up that single sign-on presence inside the other products. 2, we do logging on which buttons are used the most frequently, so we can figure out which products to weed out and which ones to keep. There's a refresh coming really soon where there's going to be some products get dropped and some new ones get added. And also, this dashboard is a messaging hub. You may often get messages when you log in here that you need to see things that are either requiring immediate action on your part. Maybe your ethics are about to flip over to be inactive. And so if you don't recertify your ethics training, then your MLS account's going to go offline. You know, there's really important messaging here that's about your membership. So those messages really do matter. And you should try and make sure you come through the dashboard once a day so that you can see all of those. And then the last thing, of course, is we do reorganize some of the products here. And so we don't want you to miss anything that's changed. And this is a great visual way to see it. There is a new version of our dashboard, a version 2, that's going to be coming very soon. Probably won't dig too deep into that today, but a brand new thing is coming that's going to clean it up, freshen it up, reorganize it a little bit, and modernize it.
Great. And the last question?
The last question would be, is there a way that we're including or excluding keywords by, say, using the term fixer or pool or rehab, things like that, occupied?
Yes.
What do you mean, to search using that word?
Yes.
Search using fixer, for example.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, there's a way to do that. Now, it does, again, rely on the agent who was inputting the data, having put that data there for you to find it. But if you're thinking that maybe somewhere in the private remarks, the agent might have mentioned the word fixer, I can say in the private remarks, find that word. Let's keep the other criteria very open. Cool. So I found 69 listings where the word fixer was used in the agent only remarks. Let's go and view those results. And the reason why I want to view them is I want to show you the trick again, where I don't have the agent remarks in my columns. What if I put it in? Going to add it right at the bottom so that it's kind of like off the right side of the screen. Check this out. So now, stretching really far off onto the right is my agent only remarks. And if I use my find again, I can use Control F or Command F on your Mac, and you'll be able to see anytime the word fixer appears anywhere in my result grid, it's going to highlight it. And there it is under property condition a bunch. There it is under all the agent only remarks. And so you can, excuse me, you can use that to find every instance of where that word occurs. And that's going to let you zing to write the detail you were interested in searching on. You'll be able to sort of see what did they mean. For example, I'm looking at row 409-66265. This came to us from the East Bay. Notice how in the property condition, it didn't mention fixer. But if I go all the way over and look at it, it certainly has added something, the value fixer, to the agent only remarks.
This is awesome. That's some out of the box thinking. I love that we just learned how to do that. And thank you for whoever asked that question. I never even thought to search that way. So hopefully we all just learned a handy new trick.
That's a cool question.
And last but not least, guys, how are we going to be getting this recording out to folks who are either watching today and want to revisit or didn't get a chance to join us?
Another fantastic question. On the MLS dashboard, there's a quick links panel, and in it is a videos block. If you go to it, this takes you to the SFAR social. Oh, sorry, it's auto playing. It takes you to the playlists for all of the association videos, and there's going to be a playlist starting in here after we record today, and it's going to be called the Super Regional Series, of which this is part 1. We have 2 more parts coming, and so maybe let's talk about that quickly. Today was Super Regional Series part 1 searching. On November the 4th, we're going to have listing entry, and we're going to focus on the city for doing that listing entry video. And then on December the 2nd, we've got part 3 coming, which Vanessa is going to help me out with a bunch of this. It's prospects and how to use them. I understand the system guts, and Vanessa is going to give me some really cool concrete examples on working with real prospects and real cases. And so that's going to be on December the 2nd. You can see we've got a bunch of other content coming. The searching outside of our area is going to be part of that Super Regional Series. We're just not going to do it as a webinar. There's going to be a DOM and CDOM and reset procedures that will focus on that slide we showed today. And you can see here one coming for how to properly use coming soon. Income property and the 5+ unit. These are all scheduled and are coming your way soon.
Lots and lots of education and training.
Awesome. This has been a super good time. I'm glad we recorded today, and the questions were fantastic. We had a really great audience today.
Absolutely. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. And huge thank you to Jody and Jay, my fellow co-hosts. It's always great getting to do a webinar with you guys.
And behind the scenes, we had Genevieve doing some scheduling for us and stuff. Did never want to forget about her. Yeah, what a great time. And Jody, thank you for feeding us really fantastic questions and helping us out with that. That was awesome.
Absolutely. Have a good one, everyone.
Signing off.